brightest minds, until the night she vanished without a trace. Taken by alien scientists, not to be greeted, but to be studied like an insect under glass. But what they didn't know was this: she wasn't just a subject. She was a force. Trapped in a cage of light, her mind became her weapon, and soon the ones who captured her would become the ones begging for answers. This isn't just a story of survival. It's a story of evolution. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. One night in Kolkata, the city was quiet except for the soft hum of ceiling fans and the distant sound of traffic. Dr. Minal Das sat in her small laboratory, surrounded by wires, blinking monitors, and pages of notes scattered across her desk. Her dark eyes stayed focused on the glowing screen in front of her. She was close, closer than she'd ever been, to proving a theory that had taken her years to shape. Brainwave communication without wires. A silent language powered only by thought. Her hands trembled slightly as she made the final adjustments, and saved her work. Outside, clouds had gathered into thick rolls, but she didn't notice. Minal was used to storms, both in weather and in life. Up above the Earth, beyond the eyes of any telescope or satellite, a ship drifted through the clouds. It moved with precision but without sound. Its outer shell shimmered in and out of visibility, protected by advanced cloaking systems no human had ever seen. Inside the vessel, Commander Jarrell stood with his arms behind his back, watching a glowing map of Earth. His skin reflected soft copper under the ship's lights, and his large amber eyes blinked slowly as information scrolled past. Next to him, Riva moved silently, her soft gray skin flickering with patterns that revealed her thoughts. They weren't from Earth. They were explorers, scientists from the Larnok Dominion, a group that traveled across galaxies collecting knowledge. But their methods, while efficient, were not always kind. "Target located," Riva said softly. Her voice was calm, like a soft echo. A red light blinked on the display, showing a small building in the heart of the city. "Her neural patterns are unusually sharp. She may be exactly what we're looking for." Jarrell nodded once. "Proceed." As the ship adjusted its course, a quiet vibration rippled through the air in Minal's lab. The glass beakers on her shelves trembled slightly. She paused, looked around, then shook her head and returned to her work. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Outside, a strange gust of wind bent the trees in the wrong direction. A blue flash of lightning cracked the sky but made no sound. Inside the ship, a long beam of light shot toward the surface, invisible to any human eye. It passed through Minal's window, touching her for just a second. In that instant, her body froze, her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed into the chair. To the world outside, it looked like she had simply fallen asleep. In truth, she was already gone, lifted through layers of clouds beyond the sky, into the waiting arms of beings who did not understand fear or kindness the way humans did. "Specimen." "Acquired," said a robotic voice inside the ship. Minal now lay inside a glass chamber filled with soft white light, her body floating weightlessly. Her mind was silent, suspended in a controlled sleep. Jarrell watched her with mild curiosity, while Riva recorded her brain activity. "High levels of neural complexity," she noted. "She may be more adaptive than expected." Back on Earth, the strange storm disappeared as quickly as it had arrived. Meteorologists would later mark it as an unusual atmospheric glitch. Nothing seemed out of place, except that one brilliant scientist was no longer where she should have been. Her family would wake up and find her chair empty, her lab untouched, her work still glowing on the screen. As the ship left Earth's orbit, it turned toward a distant star in the Carina Sagittarius arm of the galaxy. There, hidden behind dust clouds and forgotten stars, the Larnok Dominion had built a research facility known only to them. It was a place of silent halls, glowing corridors, and laboratories filled with specimens from dozens of planets. It was here that Minal was being taken, not as a guest but as a subject, a living puzzle for minds that believed they had seen it all. But what they didn't know, what they could never expect, was that Minal Das was not like anyone they had studied before. She had spent her life exploring the human mind, learning how thought could change reality, how ideas could shape machines, and even now, trapped in sleep, her mind was quietly gathering information. Her story was not one of defeat. It was the beginning of something new, something the Larnak were not prepared for. Because sometimes, when you try to study a storm, you forget it can strike back, and high above Earth, where no one could see, the storm had only just begun. A sharp beep echoed through the air as Minal slowly opened her eyes. Bright white light burned into her vision, forcing her to squint. Her head throbbed and a strange numbness filled her body. She couldn't move. She couldn't even lift her hand. She was lying flat, floating slightly above a cold surface, her body held still by some invisible force. Panic pressed at her chest, but she tried to stay calm. Her training told her to observe, to think before acting. Slowly, sounds began to register. The low hum of machines, the soft clicking of data screens, and the occasional distant voice. This wasn't Earth. That much she knew. Through the glass panel in front of her, two strange figures stood watching. One was tall and thin with smooth copper skin and long arms that bent in more places than they should. The other was shorter, with skin that shifted in soft waves of color, changing with every moment. They were not human, but they were not monsters either. They didn't look cruel, just curious. The taller one tilted his head and spoke in a quiet, sharp tone. The subject is awake, heart rate elevated, eye movement focused. The smaller one replied, expected. Her neural activity is rising quickly. She's observing us. The way they spoke about her, like a machine, a tool, made Minal feel colder than the air in the room. She wanted to speak, to ask where she was, but her throat didn't move. Her voice was gone, trapped by whatever force held her in place. Only her eyes could move, darting around the room, searching for answers. It was a clean, sterile place, full of smooth walls, glowing lights, and floating monitors. The machines pulsed quietly, their patterns strange and beautiful. If she hadn't been terrified, she might have admired the technology. Everything here was advanced, far beyond what she had seen on Earth. And yet, something about the room felt like a cage. A glass box with invisible walls and no way out. The shorter alien, Riva, tapped gently on a floating screen. Subject appears aware of surroundings, emotional response stable, brain activity above Larnak average, possibly self-regulating. Minal's eyes narrowed. She didn't understand all the words, but she caught enough. They thought she was adapting. They were right. Inside her mind, thoughts were racing. She replayed everything that had happened. The light in the lab, the feeling of her body going numb, waking here. This wasn't a dream. It was real. And if it was real, then there had to be a way out. She didn't know where she was or who these beings were, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't stay here. She had to get back. Suddenly, a sharp pulse moved through her body. She gasped silently, eyes wide, as her nerves lit up with tiny sparks of pain. The taller one, Jarrell, pressed a button. Testing reflexes, he said calmly. Minal gritted, her teeth. The pain faded just as quickly as it had come, leaving behind a trace of heat. They were studying her, experimenting like she was some kind of lab animal. But Minal was no ordinary human. She had spent years studying the brain, learning how thought patterns could shape responses, how the mind could overcome even the most impossible limits. With great effort, she focused her thoughts, not just panic or fear, but control. She thought about her work, the tests she ran, the brainwave readings, the way signals flowed through circuits. She imagined the machines in the room, how they worked, how they might be listening. Her heart slowed, her breathing evened out. Slowly, she reached out with her thoughts, pushing her will into the air around her, hoping something would answer. Riva looked up from her screen. "Did you see that?" she asked. The neural field around her shifted. Jarrell glanced over. Probably a reaction to the pulse. No, Riva said, her skin pulsing with deep blue, a sign of curiosity. She's doing something. Something intentional. They stared at her as Minal closed her eyes. She wasn't sure if it was working, but she had to try. Her brain was her only weapon here. She imagined light, sound, data flowing like rivers around her. She imagined her thoughts as waves, reaching out and touching the systems around her. And then, just for a second, one of the lights in the chamber flickered. It was so small anyone else might have missed it, but Riva didn't. The interface responded, she said. She's connected. Jarrell frowned. That's impossible. She has no access, no link. Riva's eyes stayed fixed on Minal. She doesn't need one. In the quiet of her mind, Minal felt it too. The flicker, the tiny shift, like a door cracking open. She smiled, just slightly, knowing it had begun. She didn't know where this path would take her, but she had found her first step. She wasn't just a subject in a cage anymore. She was a thinker in a system she could learn to understand. The glass might be thick, the walls might be strong, but the mind once awake is harder to contain than any prison, and her mind was fully awake. Inside the cold chamber, Minal sat quietly, her eyes closed but her mind wide open. The room hadn't changed. The glass walls still glowed softly, the machines hummed their usual tune, and the force field kept her body suspended in the air. But something was different now. Something had shifted. She could feel it, like a faint thread tying her thoughts to the space around her. She had touched the system once. Now she was determined to do it again. For days, or what felt like days, Minal remained still, using every moment to listen. She had no clock, no sunrise or sunset, but she counted her breaths, followed the rhythm of the machines, and tracked the patterns in the lights. She learned the language of the room not with words but with observation. Every flicker, every pulse told her something. Her brain worked like a sponge, soaking in every detail. This was her research now. Not in a lab on Earth, but here, inside, a world that wasn't hers. Riva continued her scans, always watching. Unlike Jarrell, who stayed distant and focused on commands, Riva seemed truly curious. She didn't see Minal as a test subject anymore. Something about the human's quiet, strength, and clear intelligence stirred something inside her. Riva started lowering the energy levels in the chamber when Jarrell wasn't watching. She adjusted the frequency of the force field slightly to ease the pressure on Minal's body. Small changes, tiny kindnesses. But they didn't go unnoticed. Minal knew someone was helping her. She couldn't be sure who, but she noticed when the restraints loosened just enough for her to move her fingers. She tested her limits, bending her wrist, turning her head slowly until she found a position where she could focus better. Then she returned to her practice, reaching out with her thoughts. She imagined her brain as a signal tower, sending waves through the walls. She focused on the faint hums, the tiny vibrations in the air. The control system responded in pulses. She didn't understand the full structure, but she could sense when she touched it. It was like swimming in a current that changed direction with her thoughts. One night, as the lights dimmed into a soft blue and the room grew silent, Minal made her biggest breakthrough. She focused harder than ever before, building a pattern in her mind. She remembered the exact rhythm that had caused the flicker days ago. Slowly, she recreated it. She repeated it again and again, fine-tuning it like a code. Then suddenly, one of the wall panels blinked in response. A sharp blue light, then a tone just for a second. She gasped, eyes flying open. Her pulse raced and the machines registered the change. Riva noticed immediately. She did something, Riva whispered, her skin flashing violet. Jarrell turned. What do you mean? I don't know how, but the interface acknowledged her. It lit up when her brainwaves reached a certain pattern. She's interacting with the system. Jarrell frowned. That's not possible. She doesn't have the right neural implants. Only Larnock minds can connect that way. Riva didn't argue, but she didn't take her eyes off Minal either. Minal, though breathless, felt a surge of hope. It was working. Her thoughts weren't just being noticed, they were being received. She didn't have their technology, but she had something else: adaptability. Her human brain, shaped by years of learning and discovery, was finding a way in. Over the next few sessions, she expanded her reach. She found she could shift the temperature slightly, dim the lights, and even trigger small alerts. She couldn't escape yet, but she could move within the system like a shadow, unseen but present. With this control, she did something bold. She built a simple message made of brainwave patterns, pulses, and signals. It wasn't words, but a kind of digital Morse code that only a trained eye could understand. She encoded her location, a piece of Earth's coordinates, and sent it into the outgoing data stream, hoping someone somewhere might catch it. Riva saw the transmission and froze. The signal was small, hidden deep in a larger data packet. But she recognized the pattern. It was the human. She had sent a message to Earth. Riva didn't report it. She saved the file and locked it away. She didn't know why she protected her. Maybe it was admiration, maybe it was guilt, or maybe deep down she believed Minal deserved to be more than an experiment. That night, as the ship floated quietly in the dark of space, Minal lay back in her chamber, exhausted but hopeful. Her body was still trapped, but her mind was not. She had connected to something larger than herself, something beyond even her own science. And she knew, without a doubt, that she was not finished. The walls of the glass cage were still in place, but the system had been touched. The current had shifted, and no prison, no matter how advanced, could hold someone whose thoughts were already free. The soft glow of morning, or what passed for morning aboard the Larnock research station, filled the glass chamber. Minal lay still, her eyes open, staring at the ceiling above her. She had stopped feeling afraid. The fear had faded days ago, replaced by quiet determination. Her body remained held in place by the invisible field, but her thoughts moved freely now, faster than ever. She had learned how to speak to the ship in her own way, through brain waves, rhythm, and memory. It wasn't just understanding anymore. It was control, slowly growing with each passing moment. Outside the chamber, Riva watched with silent awe. She had seen creatures from many worlds, but none had ever reached out to their systems without help. Minal had done more than that. She had written her own path into their machines. There was no doubt now this human was extraordinary. Jarrell, however, had grown suspicious. The system log showed strange activity, energy spikes, data trails that didn't make sense. He blamed technical errors, but part of him knew something unusual was happening. He just couldn't see it clearly, yet. That changed the next morning. An alarm beeped through the control room. One of the containment doors had unlocked for a fraction of a second, just long enough to register on the main system. Jarrell stormed into the lab, eyes blazing. "Which of you touched the chamber settings?" he demanded. Riva remained calm, hiding her knowledge behind a blank stare. "Nothing was changed, Commander," she said. The system reset itself, briefly, no signs of breach. Jarrell wasn't convinced, but he said nothing more. Still, he began watching Minal more closely. Inside her chamber, Minal could feel the pressure, but she was ready. The power within her had grown stronger. She could hear the ship now in ways she never thought possible, not with her ears, but with her mind. Every pulse, every pattern, was like a beat in a song she had learned to play. She waited for the right moment. Not yet. Not with Jarrell watching. But soon. Then, on what seemed like an ordinary cycle, the station lights flickered. Just once. But that was the signal. Minal focused all her thoughts, all her energy, into one burst. She triggered a wave of commands through the system. Lights shut off. Doorways locked. Screens went dark. And with a quiet hiss, the field around her dropped. For the first time since her arrival, she stood on her own 2 feet. Alarms blared across the station. Jarrell shouted commands, racing toward the lab, but he was too late. Minal stepped out of the chamber, calm and silent, her feet touching the smooth floor as though she belonged there. Riva met her in the hall, eyes wide with wonder. "You did it," she whispered. "I didn't think it was possible." Minal nodded once. It was never about what they allowed, it was about what I could reach. Jor-El arrived moments later, stunned to see Minal standing freely, surrounded by active systems she had taken over. "How?" he began, but the words never finished. With a simple thought, Minal turned the room on its head. The control wall slid open, and a new force field wrapped around Jor-El, trapping him inside the very cage that once held her. He pounded on the wall, disbelief in his eyes. "You wanted to study me," Minal said softly. "But you forgot to ask if I wanted to be studied." Her voice was calm, not angry. There was no revenge in her tone, only understanding. She had been their experiment, their unknown variable, but she had never been helpless. Riva stepped forward, unsure what to do. Minal looked at her, and for a long moment they said nothing. Finally, Minal spoke. "You helped me. You didn't have to. Why?" Riva's skin shimmered pale silver. "Because I saw you, not as data, not as a case, but as a person. You reminded me what curiosity should feel like." Together, they walked through the station, disabling the traps, turning off the defenses. Minal accessed a transmission panel and sent a message back to Earth. This time it wasn't just a signal. It was a map, a report, and a message of hope. She didn't want to hide what had happened. She wanted to learn from it, to share it. Then, as the ship hovered near a quiet star, Riva opened an escape pod and offered it to Minal. "This will take you home," she said. Minal stepped inside but looked back one last time. There are others like me on Earth, not scientists maybe, but thinkers, builders. They deserve to know there's more out there. And if the Larnak ever come again, come to learn, not to take. Riva nodded. "I'll remember." The pod launched, sliding into the quiet of space, aimed for Earth. As the stars streaked past her window, Minal closed her eyes. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had traveled beyond her world, been trapped, studied, and underestimated. But in the end, she had found something even greater than knowledge. She had found her voice. And far behind her, on a station no one on Earth knew existed, one scientist watched the stars and waited, wondering when humans would return, not as subjects, but as equals.